You know, not that long ago I was using a Presonus Revelator IO44 as an audio interface for my recordings. And one thing that really bothered me about it was that because of missing drivers, it just didn't behave correctly. Normally, each input should get their own channel. However, on Linux, it got mixed together. The audio was more audible on the left ear, and one input just straight up didn't work at all. Problems like this have persisted for consumer products for quite a long time, and if you wanted to use Linux professionally, you would always need to buy specialized and expensive hardware. But that might change really soon, as some hardware vendors suddenly decided to target Linux as a viable platform as well. And in this video, we're going to talk exactly about that. I believe the best way to start this topic off is to talk about my personal experiences with hardware on Linux, especially more niche products like audio interfaces and capture cards. On Linux, the overall rule of thumb is that if you want to buy dedicated hardware for any sort of input, no matter if it's a keyboard, mouse or whatever else, make sure that it is USB class compliant. The difference between a class-compliant device and one that just uses a USB connector is that the class-compliant devices are basically just plug and play, since they don't need any specialized driver to function. But the problem with that is that many popular solutions are just not, and the marketing of some products doesn't really help to figure it out. But that might start to change soon. Presonus, for example, the company that made my old IO44, has announced back in September that they will ship their top-tier digital audio workstation software, Studio One, on Linux as well. And this is huge news for anyone who is interested in recording or editing audio. Sure, there already has been a small but also solid selection of other programs, but they all suffered from the compatibility problem I mentioned earlier. With Studio One, the road to supporting all sorts of Presonus hardware has essentially been cleared, since now that they allow us to edit audio, how far behind can recordings be? Sure, there are some caveats, since they currently only support Ubuntu 23.4 and Wayland. But the fact is that this kind of stuff is necessary to build the bridge between personal and professional use. And Presonus is not alone. Focusrite is another company who has spoken about supporting Linux in the future, and most of their USB devices work already perfectly. I myself use a Scarlett 2i2 for my recordings, and it essentially was just plug and play. We really shouldn't underestimate the impact that this could have. Specialized niches like video or audio production often prefer Linux over macOS or Windows because of its reliability. You can slim down a distro to the specific application you need and it just runs. The problem up until now was that those applications just did not exist to the extent that many professionals need. And it's part of the reason on why macOS and Windows are still superior in those industries. Linux, on the other hand, would be perfect for them, since it can easily be customized and slimmed down to just their specific use cases. It can basically behave just like a server, except with a desktop environment. And trust me when I tell you this, a lot of companies want exactly that. But it's not just them. Us end consumers also profit from a broader range of hardware and, very importantly, cheaper options, which will ultimately result in a better experience altogether. Linux open source nature also makes it way easier to detect odd behavior of proprietary applications, and has also convinced many of them to embrace open source more altogether. I believe that Presonus and Focusrite are really making the right move here, since with Chrome OS becoming more of a typical Linux distro as well, Linux already makes up quite a nice market. You know, I'm actually just waiting for one company to throw their fedora into the ring, and that's Elgato. For a lot of streamers, gamers and content creators, Elgato products are the #1 choice, since in comparison to their competition, their products are solid and feature a somewhat reasonable price. Sometimes. I myself tried out the Camlink Pro, which features 4 HDMI inputs, each rated for 1080p and 60 FPS. But it just didn't work on Linux. The next better option from Blackmagic is essentially double the price. And that's not really something that everyone is willing to pay. Even though Elgato has currently no plans on supporting Linux whatsoever, that could change really fast if the infrastructure is in place. The Linux desktop is still a niche operating system and it has some flaws, that's true. Even GNOME, the objectively most standardized desktop environment, doesn't feature everything yet that has existed on Windows or other operating systems for years. But don't let that blind you. As someone who really tries to make their videos as user-focused as possible, I think it's safe to say that Linux can already be used by most, since most just use their computer for browsing the web or some office work anyway. You know, basically don't mess with the operating system itself. In conclusion, Presonus and Focusrite supporting Linux is a huge step towards being more accessible and more headache-free to use. While the development of drivers and actually compatible devices is probably still going to take some time, having professional software in place is a nice start. And who knows, maybe one day Linux will actually be able to fire up the desktop competition again. It sure would be fun to see. If you've liked this video, then please make sure to show it with a like and let us also hear your opinions about this topic in the comments down below. If you want to support the growth of this channel and our community, then please feel free to check out our membership program as well. And all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.